members of my staff and the presenters today from ODF and State Treasury.
Great. Thanks, everybody. My apologies for being late. And I assume, Director Walker, that I need to call the June 9th, 2020 Land Board meeting, open it up officially. Boom, boom.
Correct.
To order. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Governor, for calling our meeting to order. The Treasurer and his staff has joined us, as well as Secretary Corno and her staff. Also on the line are Matt DeVore, our legal counsel, members of my staff, and presenters today from ODF and State Treasury. I do want to remind the public that this meeting is streaming live on the DSL YouTube channel. All you can hear is the audio. We don't have a way to put the video on, so audio will have to do for now. I do want to remind our listening audience that the Land Board places great value on information received from the public. Testimony on action or consent agenda items may be emailed to landboard.testimony@state.or.us. And in this virtual setting, we'll make every effort to read written testimony into the record if requested. My assistant, Erin Smith, will be letting me know if there are any comments that come in while we are speaking, and she will send me a Skype message. So we'll get on that right away. Testimony may be submitted while the meeting is in progress, and of course that email address is up on the screen, and along with guidelines for providing testimony. If you're requesting testimony to be read aloud, please submit it before the related agenda item is discussed and keep it under 3 minutes. So those are my introductory remarks, Governor and members of the board. So I'll move on to the agenda, and we'll get started. I anticipate we will be here a while today, so hope you all have a snack. The first item is our consent agenda item number 1, request for approval of the minutes of the February 4, 2020 State Land Board meeting.
Madam Chair, would you like a motion on these individually, or do you want to do them in mass?
I'm very, I would be delighted to take them in block.
Okay, we'll do that.
All right, then we'll move on to consent agenda item 2, which is request for approval to initiate the review and determination of the exchange of surface ownership land in Kearney County. The authorities are set out below, and the map is located in Appendix A. In November of last year, the department received an application to exchange land from Kevin Thomas, an adjacent landowner to the 164-acre parcel, DSL parcel, located in Kearney County. For this potential exchange, Mr. Thomas has offered a 160-acre parcel of land. And the proposed land exchange would serve to block up both the department's surface ownership and Mr. Thomas's surface ownership. The 160-acre parcel that DSL would be acquiring is adjacent to a 640-acre parcel that we already own. So this would create a continuous block of approximately 800 acres of common school fund land. The acreage that is currently in our ownership is being leased by someone for grazing purposes, and he is totally in favor of this exchange to help block up and improve his grazing management of the leasehold. I don't see any comments coming in from Erin, so the department recommends the State Land Board authorize the department to initiate the review and determination for the potential land exchange of properties in Kearney County, located at Township 24 South, Range 32.5 East, Sections 4 and 5, and tax lots 1500 and 1800. I'll move on to agenda item 3, consent agenda item 3, whether the land board should authorize the review and determination of the acquisition of properties adjacent to the South Slough Reserve Visitor Center entrance. I'll detail those properties in a moment. The authorities are set out below. The map is in Appendix A. This one will take a little bit longer to explain. Parcel 1 is located in Coos County at Township 26 South, Range 14 West, Section 27, Tax Lot 100. This 1.14 acre property is owned by Coos County and crosses the existing driveway to the South Slough Reserve Visitor Center. Parcel 2 that we are looking to acquire is also located in Coos County at Township 26 South, Range 14 West, Section 26, Tax Lot 500. This 0.56 acre property is privately owned and located between Parcel 1 and the South Slough Reserve. Both property owners are supportive of the reserve purchasing their respective properties. The goal is to secure state ownership of the entrance to the South Slough Reserve Visitor Center. Access to the Visitor Center is currently established through a legal right-of-way easement across the proposed acquisition property. As a result of ownership, South Slough would then own the entire driveway accessing its visitor center, and it would allow us to immediately begin to improve the property and clean up the residents, down in dead vegetation and planting native plants and shrubs, and these are visual concerns expressed by the community. It would also reduce wildfire risk. Ownership of the property would put the reserve in a position to submit future grant proposals to create a welcoming and fully accommodating entrance that will likely include a new parking area and trail connection to the visitor center. Once acquired, that property would be managed by the reserve on behalf of the department as special stewardship land, and it will be eventually brought into the official boundary of the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve. The reserve acquired funds for this project, $60,000 in federal funds to support the acquisition of Parcel 1. This grant requires a one-to-one cost share from non-federal sources. So we were very fortunate that $25,000 is being generously donated by the Friends of South Slough to cover a portion of this match requirement, and you'll see their letter in Appendix B. The remaining match requirement would be covered by in-kind staff time and cash from the Department of State Lands, which can include funds used to purchase Parcel 2. These properties will need to have appraisals done as part of the due diligence. Coos Reserve staff has been working with the Coos County Forester on the purchase of Parcel 1. We have a terrific working relationship with the County Forester, and I certainly credit that to our Reserve Manager, Bree Yednock. We have received necessary approvals prior to bringing this request here today. On November 15, 2019, the Reserve received approval from the South Slough Reserve Management Commission to move forward. I also chair that commission. On November 20th of 2019, the Reserve received approval from the legislature through the Joint Committee on Ways and Means, Subcommittee on Natural Resources, to submit that funding proposal to NOAA for the acquisition. And the Reserve also coordinated with and received support from all 3 coastal tribes. So we're very pleased about that. I don't see any comments coming in, so our recommendation would be the department recommends that the Land Board authorize the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve through the Department of State Lands Real Property staff to complete due diligence reports in support of acquiring 2 tax lots totaling 1.7 acres adjacent to the entrance of the South Slough Reserve Visitor Center. And that concludes the consent items.
All right. Mr. Treasurer, do you have any questions?
I do not, Madam Chair.
Madam Secretary of State, do you have any questions?
I do not, thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the consent items as presented by Director Walker.
The treasurer moves approval of the consent items, including the request for approval of the minutes of February 4th, 2020, request for approval to initiate the review and determination of the exchange of surface ownership in Kearney County, and the request for approval to initiate the review and determination of the purchase of 1.7 acres at the entrance of the South Slough Reserve. Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing and seeing none, it is so ordered. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Governor. We'll move on to our action items. Action items 4 and 5 relate to Bear Creek. Action item 4 is a request from Coos County for approval of a permanent easement for a bridge across Bear Creek in Section 22 of Township 28 South, Range 14 West, Coos County. The easement is necessary to maintain the bridge crossing Bear Creek on Charles Fellows Road. The map can be found in Appendix A, and the easement draft easement is in Appendix B. And your history lesson for the day, which you knew had to be coming, comes from Ryan Mann, the assistant to the treasurer, and there are 86 Bear Creeks in Oregon. It is the most common creek name in the entire state. So at one time we must have had a lot of bears. The authorities are set out below. The public, an application was submitted to adjoining property owners, various state and federal resource and permitting agencies, and tribal entities. One comment was received from the public from an adjacent property owner who was concerned the easement might impact his use of the bridge. It does not. A second comment was received from the Coquille Indian tribe requesting the tribe be notified 72 hours in advance of any ground disturbing activities so they can have a cultural resource monitor on site. All comments that were received have been addressed and forwarded to Coos County. The Charles Fellows Road County Bridge has been in place since 1979. It serves as the only access for 3 private residences. The term easement expired on October 31, 2019, and Coos County has requested the easement be made permanent pursuant to Oregon Administrative Rule 141-123-0070 sub 5. An application fee of $750 was received on December 20, 2019. No further compensation is required. There are no comments that I see, so my recommendation from the department is that we recommend the State Land Board approve a permanent easement to Coos County 25978-EA to maintain and operate a bridge on, over, under, or across Bear Creek. And that concludes that presentation.
Any questions? Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the request for approval of a permanent easement for bridge across Bear Creek in Coos County.
Great. A second from Secretary Clarno. Hearing and seeing no objection, so approved.
Terrific. We'll move on to the second request from Coos County under Agenda Item 5 for approval of permanent easement for a bridge across Bear Creek in Section 22 of Township 28 South, Range 14 West in Coos County to maintain a bridge crossing Bear Creek on Parkersburg Road. The map is in Appendix A, and the draft easement is in Appendix B. The authorities are set out below. The application was circulated to adjoining property owners, various state and federal resource and permitting agencies, and tribal entities. The Department of Fish and Wildlife commented that the bridge does not impact fish production, so that's good. Another comment was received from the Coquel Indian Tribe, again asking that they be notified 72 hours in advance so they can have a cultural resource monitor present for ground disturbing work. Those comments have been received and forwarded to Coos County. The Parkersburg Road County Bridge has also been in place since 1979. It serves as a bypass for State Highway 42 South during emergency events. So this is a critical bridge indeed for the county. The current term easement expired on October 31, 2019, and of course the county asked for the permanent easement pursuant to the same administrative rule as the prior request. The application fee of $750 was received on December 20 as well, 2019, and no further compensation is required. There are no comments that have come in, so the department staff recommends that the State Land Board approve the permanent easement to Coos County 42135-EA, an easement to maintain and operate a bridge on, over, under, or across Bear Creek. And that concludes the presentation.
Any questions for Director Walker?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the request for approval of permanent easements for a bridge across Bear Creek in Coos County, this one on Parkersburg Road.
Thank you. Do I have a second for the motion?
You have a second.
Great. Thank you, Secretary Clarno. Hearing and seeing no objection, the motion's approved. This is the Parkersburg Road permanent easement across Bear Creek.
All right. Thank you, Governor. We'll move on to agenda item 6. This is the request for approval to submit the Department of State Land's 2021-23 budget. The authorities are set out below, and I get to put myself on mute because I've invited Deputy Director Jean Straight to make this presentation today. So, Jean, if you'd like to begin, that'd be great.
Yes, hi. Good morning. This is Jean Straight. As Vicki said, I'm the Deputy Director of Administration. So the department is preparing their 2021-23 budget proposal, which maintains current service levels to support continued stewardship of the lands, waters, and funds that directly benefit Oregon communities. The department has also prepared 13 policy packages to significantly advance work in 3 strategic areas. Those areas are providing exceptional service to all Oregonians and their communities, supporting schools by seeking opportunities to increase common school fund revenue, and protecting lands and waters to ensure their contributions to a thriving Oregon. So under the...
And Jean, could I
Yes.
interrupt you for a moment?
Yes.
In the written materials, it does say that there are 12 policy packages. Could you explain why that is now 13?
Yes, I will get to that here in this first section under providing exceptional services. So the first ones
Great.
under those is we have 2 packages that are around the trust property transfer to the Oregon State Treasurer's Office. The first one being Package 103 is around $11 million, and that is transferring staff and supplies and services budget over to the treasurer. Package 104 is the reconciliation package, so the support services positions are partial positions that are being transferred, and so this is requesting them to be added back into our budget because we can't afford to lose pieces of people. So that's what that one is. Package 105 is a workload. Over the last biennium, we have seen the need for additional people to help provide services to the community, and this is to make those positions permanent. There are 7 positions in that package. And then the package that we added is Package 113. It's a reclass package. It is 3 positions that we were unable, that have been deemed to be reclassed, but we were unable to have permanent financing for. So we're requesting the budget in our budget. Under supporting schools, we have two technology packages. One is the implementation of our land administration system. That's for $4 million. We are currently we've been approved Stage Gate 1. We're close to getting approved for Stage Gate 2, and we'll be going out for an RFP, and this is implementation cost. Package 107, during our budget, we were given a budget note that we needed to work with the Department of Administrative Services on an IT assessment. In that IT assessment, they recommended that we add 2 positions to our IT resources, one being a database administrator and one being a business analyst. At this point, we've determined that we will ask for the database administrator position because that is such a key position for implementing a new system, and we will reevaluate the business analyst position at a later date. And then we also have 2 grant carry fund forwards. So we requested federal money from NOAA for the South Slough program. And this is just this is a package that will carry any money left over at the end of this biennium to the next biennium so we can finish out these grant programs. And then the other one is the EPA grant, and that is for removal fill, and that same thing. Anything that's left over as of June 30th, 2021, we need the authority to be able to spend it in the next biennium. The next group of packages is protecting lands and water. So the first 2 are the Portland Harbor. These have been in our budget for the last few years. We have POP 101, which is the Portland Harbor Defense. That includes the limited duration position that we've had for the last few years. We're also adding another limited duration position and a half-time insurance specialist for this program. These resources are needed because that project is ramping up. We are entering into agreements with property holders, and action is happening on that. And the half-time insurance specialist is a shared resource with our Healthy and Safe Public Waters, the abandoned and derelict vessels and illegal camping package that we have. 102 is our cleanup, and that's about 6.8 million. And then we have POP 108, which is our school forest land and fire protection and management. It's about $3 million. $2 million of that is for the Titan Kelly contract, and 1.25 million is for fire protection for the Elliott and for our other forests. Package 109 is our abandoned and derelict vessel and illegal camping package. This is tied to a legislative concept that we have. Thank you. Legislative concept that we have, and it includes a permanent natural resource position. It also includes the other half of the insurance specialist. And then there is $500,000 in there to help continue work in response with IGAs and MOUs with other local governments. And then there's also $500,000 general fund request that would be for a statewide vessel turn-in program. And like I said, this mirrors the legislative concept. And then we have...
And Jean, I'm looking at this right now, and I see we had a typo. It is not a $500,000 general fund request. It is general fund. So, just so folks understand, we are not having fun with $500,000.
Oh, we left off the D, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then package 110, it continues the Submerged Lands Enhancement Fund that was established by the Oregon Legislature in ORS 274-388. And this grant provides local communities and organizations with funds to improve state-owned submerged and submersible land through projects such as removal of abandoned and derelict vessels, marine debris cleanup, invasive species removal, and habitat and water quality enhancement. That's for $200,000. So that is our POPs, and then of course our current service level. So I'll turn it back over to you, Vicki.
All right. I don't see any questions from the public. Governor and members of the board, I'd ask if you have any questions before I make my recommendation.
I don't have any questions. Secretary Clarno, Treasurer Reed?
No
None for me.
questions.
Thank you.
Okay. The Department of State Lands recommends the Land Board approve submission of the department budget, including policy packages 101 through 113 to the Department of Administrative Services.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the recommendation to submit requests 101 through 113 to Department of Administrative Services.
Second.
Great. Treasurer Reed moves submission of the Department of State Lands budget request. We've got a second from Secretary Clarno. Hearing and seeing no objection, the motion's approved.
All right, thank you. Moving right along to agenda item 7. This is the request for the State Land Board approval of the Oregon Department of Forestry's proposed 2021-2023 Common School Fund budget. The authorities are set out below. ODF Director Peter Doherty and Liz Dent, Forest Division Chief, are both on the line and will be making this presentation to you today. So I'll turn that over to them now.
Good morning, Governor Brown, members of the board. For the record, I am Peter Doherty, Oregon State Forester and Director of the Department of Forestry. I'm joined virtually by Liz Dent, State Forest Division Chief, and we are presenting our agency request budget for the management of 33,005 acres of Common School Fund forest land. We manage under an agreement with the State Land Board and DSL, who set the goals and management direction, and we manage and protect these lands to maximize short and long-term benefits to Oregonians, consistent with sound stewardship, conservation, and business management principles. Our budget proposes a current service level of $4.3 million for the 2021-23 biennium. This request is down slightly from the 2019-2021 ODF legislatively approved budget of $4.35 million. This budget covers all management costs on the 33,005 acres at $3.28 million. It also covers statewide fire patrol assessment of $1.02 million, which covers fire protection for all DSL parcels, including the Elliott. Note that DSL does have one policy option package that would affect the DSL budget authority. That's the POP that would place the fire patrol assessment on common school forest lands into the DSL budget. If that POP is approved, it would decrease our budget request to $3.28 million, which is just for the management cost. And with that, I'll turn it over to Liz Dent for the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, Governor Brown, Madam Secretary, and Mr. Treasurer. For the record, my name is Liz Dent, and I'm the State Forest Division Chief for the Oregon Department of Forestry. I'll just get a little bit more in depth on how we're managing state forests and the expectations that we see coming from the management of these lands over the next biennium. So the activities in managing these lands include operational planning, sale layout, surveys for threatened and endangered species, which involves coordination with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to ensure compliance with the Endangered Species Act, road construction and maintenance, access and easements, activities involving reforestation, and other young stand management activities such as thinning, and protection of cultural resource areas. We also work with the tribe's stakeholders and the public in all of our planning processes to ensure transparency and engagement. For the 2021-2023 biennium, we are projecting a harvest volume of approximately 17.2 million board feet to produce an estimated gross revenue of $8.28 million and a net to the Common School Fund of $3.98 million. Again, highlighting from State Forester Doherty's comment, separately from our expenditures, the fire patrol assessment is paid for, and Peter highlighted that that's a little over $1 million. I do want to emphasize that that's based on a revenue projection from last fall. We certainly have seen a little bit uncertainty as a result of the pandemic, and so we are being cautious as we move forward, and we'll learn more in the coming months as to if those projections are different than was expected last fall in terms of the amount that we can harvest and the revenue that we think we will be generating. So with that, our recommendation is for approval of the 2021-2023 current service level budget.
Thank you, Liz. Questions for either Director Doherty or Liz Dent, Treasurer Reed or Secretary Clarno?
Governor, I had a question of Ms. Dent. Your concern about the pandemic and what that may have caused, is that based on timber value or just the lack of being able to cut trees due to the virus?
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I guess two things that I would say is immediately following, so in early March, we saw several mills and log yards have sort of rolling closures where they would be open for a few weeks and then closed for a few weeks, et cetera, and an anticipated drop in the value of that timber. So speaking to that question, that's less about the actual impacts of a work environment under the pandemic conditions as it was around an economic response. We have seen that initial sort of hit, if you will, to the market conditions. We've seen that soften quite a bit over the past few weeks, and so we're tracking that very carefully. But it is largely around the demand for timber products.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just to follow up on that question, Ms. Dent, I heard you say that you said softening. I'm assuming that means that things are stabilizing a bit more. And if I've got that right, what do you see with the caveat of I expect a lot of uncertainty, how that market continues to respond?
Treasurer Reed, yeah, please go. Peter, go ahead.
I'll jump in. I spoke to our forest economist this morning in anticipation of a question like this. And so as Liz mentioned, the mills were shutting down. All the mills, or most of the mills, have reopened, and prices have returned to $700 a thousand, which is kind of normal. Based on the mill's response, demand appears to be there, but there are some challenges. So operators still have challenges with social distancing. It's hard to log or run mills under the social distancing requirements. so supply may be somewhat limited. And at the peak of our response to the pandemic, unemployment was up to 50% in the forestry sector. And the mills reopening should help that. But at this point, we don't know how much of an impact that 2 to 3 month period have, because we haven't seen the data from either the harvest tax revenue coming in or taxes in general. So we'll need to know another data point before we know how much unemployment's recovered and how much the actual decline impacted. So overall, it is looking better, but there's 2 caveats to this, and that's fire season and the potential for a coronavirus resurgence. The quarter that we missed that I talked about with the 3 months of a decline is normally starts slow because we're coming out of a wet winter, but usually ends strong, and we missed that picking up. The third quarter, which we're going into, tends to be low because of fire season, and it'll depend on the kind of fire season, how low it is. And in order to have a full recovery, we'll need a real healthy fourth quarter, and that's around October, November, December, and that's when we see the chance for a resurgence of the virus. There's a risk associated with that. So overall, we're feeling more optimistic than we were 2 weeks ago, but given the caveats, we're being cautious about saying we're in full recovery.
Thank you.
I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you.
Director Walker,
Madam
do
Chair.
we need to, go ahead.
Oh, I was
Go
just
ahead.
going to ask if you were ready for a motion. I'm happy to make one.
I'm ready for
You're gonna ask a
motion.
question, I'm sorry. Okay,
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the Department of Forestry's proposed budget for submission to the Department of Administrative Services.
Treasurer Reed moves approval of the Oregon Department of Forestry budget request. Is there,
Second.
great, thank you. Hearing and seeing no objections, so approved.
Thank you, Governor, and I just wanted to note that there may be a policy option package that would cause an increase to ODF's agency request budget. Okay, we will move on to agenda item 8, and I always like to hear about this one. This is our annual report on Common School Fund
Liz Dent.
Left.
for fiscal year 2019. Deputy Director Bill Ryan will be delivering this report today. So, Bill, you're on.
Good morning, Governor Brown, Secretary Clarno, and Treasurer Reed. For the record, I am Bill Ryan, Deputy Director of Operations at the Department of State Lands. This report provides the State Land Board a year-end summary of the financial performance of the Common School Fund trust lands under the Department of State Lands oversight. Included in the summary are the overall revenues and expenditures associated with these lands, which are the result of a broad range of real property management activities, including leases, easements, licenses, special uses, and land sales and exchanges. This annual report presents outcomes from the 2019 fiscal year, which ended last June 30th of 2019, and includes discussion of future real property management direction and priorities. And normally this report is presented to the board in October or December, but this presentation has been put off due to packed agendas from previous land board meetings. The department manages about 1.5 million acres of lands in different land classifications. And the land classifications and the acreages for each of those are shown on Table 1 in the report. And there's also a map showing the locations of those lands in the state in Appendix A. The largest classifications are rangelands, of which there are about 621,000 acres, and forest lands, of which there are 122,000 acres. The market value at the end of fiscal year 2019 for those lands was estimated at just over $577 million. That's roughly 1/3 of the total value of the Common School Fund, and those real properties appreciated 5.37% across all land classifications since the prior year. The common school lands are managed per the Real Estate Asset Management Plan, or the REAMP. The REAMP strategy includes rebalancing the portfolio through acquisition of assets with high performance potential and the strategic disposal of selected non- or lower performing assets. The real property program's focus in recent years has been preparation of industrial, commercial, residential lands for sale and addressing the challenge of the Elliott State Forest, which has been a net cost to the Common School Fund. Appendix B provides a summary of revenues and expenditures organized by land classification for fiscal year 2019 and for the 2 prior years as well. As you can see, 2019 was not a good year for net operating income or return on asset value. The net operating income for all lands was actually negative $666,000, and the return on asset value across all land classifications was negative 0.12%. The net expenses for the Elliott State Forest continue to be the primary drag on net revenue for the Common School Fund lands for 2019. Range lands were also negative, which is unusual. Usually they're in the 6 figures of net revenue. Unfortunately, there was a large wildfire expense of $329,000 and also the loss of a wind energy lease of $295,000 in 2019, which made that a negative for that year. And that wind energy lease project was not pursued due to a lack of transmission infrastructure. The 2020 report will look better due to some industrial, commercial, residential sales that were completed after the report period, including the Stevens Road parcel, the Helvetia parcel, and the Milliken Road parcel. And I believe Director Walker is going to touch on those a little later in the meeting. Working per the REAMP, the department is pursuing increased net revenue and return on asset value for the Common School Fund lands. The department continues to work through finding a resolution to the revenue challenges associated with managing trust lands within the Elliott State Forest, as well as across all its forest land classified properties. Part of this work includes analyzing options to reduce costs and increase revenue on certified forest lands managed by the Department of Forestry for DSL. The department is working with ODF on 2 efforts to do so. One is partnering with ODF in their development of a habitat conservation plan for ODF-managed forest lands in the western part of the state to ensure coverage under the Federal Endangered Species Act. An HCP would ultimately reduce management costs and increase certainty regarding future harvest volumes over several decades. The other option, or the other thing we're working on, is identifying common school forest lands and Board of Forestry owned forest lands that might be exchanged to consolidate ownership and thereby provide efficiencies for management and harvest of those lands. And I'd like to state that the hiring of our DSL forester, Ryan Singleton, in early 2019 has been critical in advancing those efforts. It's been very helpful to have someone with forestry expertise in the department. Another option that we're looking at for the future is increasing renewable energy revenues on Common School Fund lands. Continued renewable energy development is anticipated in Oregon in the coming decades, particularly solar energy, wind energy, offshore wind, and associated transmission line development. The Oregon Department of Energy received a $1.1 million grant last year from the Federal Department of Defense for the Oregon Renewable Energy Siting Assessment Project, or RESA. Completing compatibility assessments on military needs, renewable energy markets, and development constraints and opportunities that incorporate stakeholder, tribal, and local government feedback from this project will meet the project goal of raising awareness of renewable energy compatibility needs and provide educational tools to identify potential project areas that have less conflict and that could support economic development. DSL is a member of the technical groups providing expertise to that project, and the key deliverables, which include an Oregon-compatible renewable energy siting assessment report and a mapping tool and associated GIS data layers, will provide the benefits of the department of removing some of the uncertainty regarding which areas are acceptable for renewable energy development. It will identify priority transmission needs for planning investment and provide marketing opportunities for CSF lands, Common School Fund lands. And the report is anticipated to be completed and the mapping tools done in spring of 2021. Another thing that the department is working on is resolving the federal in lieu lands. And these were lands that would have gone to the state as part of the Common School Fund lands at statehood, but were already owned by another entity. There were roughly 5,200 acres owed in the past, and the department has been working with the Bureau of Land Management, which has a list of lands classified as available for disposable. And this has been an iterative process, and we are just shy of 1,500 acres remaining owed to the state. And so the department is focusing on lands with commercial, industrial, residential, or agricultural potential, or forest lands comparable to current Common School Fund forest lands. And we're about to submit a list of suitable properties to BLM for their consideration to resolve the outstanding 1,500 acres. So in summary, the Common School Fund Trust land property portfolio, with an estimated value of approximately $577 million, is a substantial asset of the Common School Fund as a whole. The nature of this portfolio is such that it's a relatively stable asset, but with a low return on asset value. In addition to generating revenue for the Common School Fund, these lands provide benefits to Oregonians, such as providing open space and wildlife habitat open to the public for recreation, hunting, and fishing, and providing cropland and rangelands for lease. And with that, I'll take any questions.
I don't have any questions, Bill. Thank you. That was very comprehensive. Secretary Clarno, any questions?
Yes, I don't really have a question as much as a comment, Governor. I appreciate your listening to me and letting me vent a little here. And maybe, Mr. Ryan, you can pass this along as they're going ahead with this mapping situation, because it's probably not anything that the Common School Fund can do, but this transmission issue with Bonneville Power has been something I'm very well aware of in the last 10 years, and how it's limited our ability to have economic development. There's numerous companies that have come in because of the growth in Central Oregon that have wanted to locate between here and Prineville in this greater triangle area, and cannot do so because the transmission lines are inadequate to serve this area. It seems as though someone did not realize the growth we may have, and then even though we're in the middle of it for quite a number of years, it's still not been resolved. And we've worked with Bonneville Power to try to figure out how it can be done. And it looks like it's a really long-term thing that we may have the next recession before we ever figure out how we can provide electricity to people over here due to the lack of transmission. So thank you for your listening to my comments. If you'd pass it along, I'd appreciate it.
Well, thank you for that, Secretary Clarno. Yeah, the lack of transmission capacity is a huge problem, and it's actually the reason that we lost that rather lucrative lease for our property in southeastern Oregon for a wind energy project. There's certainly adequate wind, but the transmission capacity is just not there at this point. So hopefully this report that is being developed by the Department of Energy using that grant will identify the key corridor needs, transmission need areas, so that there'll be the ability to do some investment and some planning to open those up and make those available.
Yeah, I would just say that there's lots of studies been done on the needs, just nothing's been done.
Okay, let's see what we can do to change that.
Thank you.
Treasurer Reed.
No questions, Madam Chair.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. This was excellent.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Governor, I think you'll recall when I was in the Senate, I served on a committee for the Western Governors Association, and we discussed the transmission issues, and it became a priority for the WGA, and I know that you are becoming chair of that organization sometime soon. So I suspect that might be on your agenda as well.
And in fact, Director Walker, my initiative was going to be electrifying the West. So hopefully we can continue to focus on needed transmission infrastructure for all of our communities in the Western region, frankly, which is really challenging for a lot of our, in particular for a lot of our rural communities.
Awesome. I look forward to it. All right, thank you. We will move on to agenda item 9, and this item is the annual review of the Common School Fund, presented by Mike Viteri, Senior Investment Officer with the Oregon State Treasury. I regret we're not able to put Mike's PowerPoint up on the YouTube screen while he's talking, but folks who are listening can see it in the agenda items, and he will indicate when he switches to the next page. It's always exciting to hear this report. He understands it quite well because he's an expert in this field, and I think you're going to enjoy the presentation today. So, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Vicki. I hope
I set you up now, so don't disappoint.
Thank you. Good morning, Governor Brown, Secretary Clarno, and Treasurer Reed. For the record, again, my name is Michael Viteri, Senior Investment Officer at Oregon State Treasury. Typically, the Common School Fund annual review has been provided on a calendar year basis, but given that December 30th, 2019 seems like almost a lifetime ago, I'll be providing performance updates through March 31st, 2020 as well. So I hope I don't inundate you with too many numbers. But if we could turn to page 2, the titled Common School Fund Asset Allocation Policy. If you recall, the Oregon Investment Council approved the new asset allocation for the Common School Fund in late 2017, which added real estate and alternatives to the Common School Fund. Now, real estate can include, but not limited to, office buildings, retail, multifamily, and industrial, in addition to other non-core real estate investments. And an example of non-core would be student housing, for instance. Alternatives, the alternative investment sleeve, if you will, would include investments in greenfield or brownfield infrastructure projects, which could include investments in sustainable energy infrastructure such as wind and solar. Alternatives also include investments in diversifying liquid strategies such as long-short equity, commodities, and currency. And long-short equity could be, I'll give you a simple example of that. If you had a view that Coca-Cola was a better company than Pepsi, then you could buy $100,000 worth of Coca-Cola stock and short $100,000 worth of Pepsi stock, and you'd just be able to capture the differential. So that's a really simplistic example, but that's kind of encapsulates what long-short strategy is all about, and that's done in the alternatives group. Now again, we're looking at page number 2. Page number 2. If you look at the bottom component, you'll see a grayed out area which shows the 10-year expected returns and risk for the Common School Fund. These are capital market assumptions that are put together by our consultant, and our consultant is Callan. And the objective of this particular study, this asset allocation study, was to improve the return profile of the Common School Fund and also reduce the risk associated with it. And in fact, by adding these two asset classes, that's what has been accomplished, at least in theory. We're adding real estate, we're adding alternatives, and we're improving the return profile from 6.5% annual return to 6.6, so a better return profile, while also lowering the risk profile from 14.5% standard deviation down to 13.2% standard deviation. Now, these are projections performed by consultants. Consultants don't have crystal balls. They're really more like educated estimates, or as I like to call them, guesstimates. If we turn to page 3, we'll see that returns varied quite a bit from the estimates provided by the consultants, and we expect that. I mean, it's never perfect. It's never the same return year upon year. We expect volatility. But this, over these 2 quarters, the volatility is pretty wild. If we look at the top panel, where it says in the blue area, periods ending 12/31/2019, we'll see that the Common School Fund market value is about $1.9 billion, and I believe that's an asset high. I don't think it's been that high before. We'll see the returns for the period ending 12/31/19 for the 3-month period, 4.68 positive return. For the 1-year period, 16%, 3-year period, 9%, 5 years, almost 7%, and the 10 years, a little bit above 8%. So these returns have been great. Your liability really is the 3.5% annual distribution rate, plus the 0.5% Senate Bill 1566 distribution. So 4% bogey, if you will, a 4% objective. And you the Common School Fund returns handily outperform that. So be able to make these distributions and still compound more on behalf of the fund.
Just to refresh everyone's recollection, Senate Bill 1566 is a funding stream designated to go toward paying down the unfunded actuarial liability for our PERS system. So.
Thank you, Governor Brown. If we look at the grayed area underneath, that ends up showing the excess return, which is in line with our expectations. So this is the Common School Fund returns minus the Common School Fund policy benchmark, which is really a compilation of the different asset class benchmarks all put together. It's a weighted average. So that's the bogey that we try to hit, or the benchmark you try to hit. And returns are, over the long term, slightly ahead, mid-range for the 3 and 5 years, a little bit below the 3-month and the 1 year ahead. And that's our expectation, is over the long term we'll be able to outperform the benchmark and do a good job for the Common School Fund, in addition to OPERF and State Accident Insurance Fund and all the other clients from whom we manage money. Now we roll forward 1 quarter, 3 months. COVID-19 comes into play, pandemic comes into play, and then a financial crisis happens. So the Common School Fund market value drops from $1.9 billion to $1.6 billion. You'll see the 3-month return is almost negative 12%. The 1-year return is almost negative 4%. See the 3 and the 5 and the 10 years, they're still positive. They're up there, but they're still quite stressed. If you look at the excess return line, you'll see that the excess returns were negative across the board. And the reason for this is that the Common School Fund, like OPERF, is mostly invested in active strategies. And active strategies tend to lag a little bit during times of stress. That's full within our expectations. We understand that. We don't like to see that happen, but it's expected in an environment like this. If we move ahead to before we move ahead to page 4, what has been driving this? And that's what page 4 will get us to. We look at page 4. Public equity represents almost 50% of the Common School Fund return, so it's a significant driver of the returns. If you look at the middle panel, period ending 12/31/19, again, just concentrate on the top returns. You'll see the Common School Fund public equity returns. The market value of public equity is about $900 million. 3-month return, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year returns, all solid numbers. They're great. They're fantastic. Excess returns, a little mixed over that same time period. If we roll forward, again, 3 months, pandemic, financial crisis, we'll see virtually almost all those top-line numbers are negative. They're negative for the 1 year. They're negative for the 3 year. They're treading water at the 5 year and treading water at the 10 year. So 1.62% for the 5 year, 6.17% for the 10 year. And again, you see the same pattern. Excess returns, the gray area down below, negative returns, negative excess returns of 2% for the 3-month, 1 year, and around 1% for the 3 year, 5 year. Again, within expectations, when we see a shock like this, an exogenous shock, we expect to see some returns like that. Now, what's driving that return within public equity space? The reason for that return differential is that in addition to just active management, we have systematic tilts towards value investing, size, which is small cap, and profitability. So if you think about value, think about the way Warren Buffett invests. He's a big value investor. You start looking for undervalued stocks, stocks that no one really likes, stocks that are still profitable, generally stocks that end up being smaller than your largest cap stock. So that's kind of the investment style of public equity. It's persistent, it's pervasive. There's been studies that have been done back to the 1920s, 1930s that show it's dominant not only in the U.S. but around the world. And we like to hang our hats on intellectually honest investment practices. And so we're sticking to this type of investment. It's been painful. Let's dig into page number 5, or flip to page number 5 to find out what's been going on. So I mentioned value investing. The antithesis of value investing is growth investing. And growth investing, you could kind of simplify it by thinking about technology stocks and biotechnology stocks. You'll see that there's differentials between growth and value stock investing. In 2019, growth stocks outperformed value stocks by almost 10%. 2018, that outperformance between growth and value was about 7%. In 2017, growth outperformed value by almost by 16.5%. If you look at the bottom panel below, you'll see the historical observations of the value premiums. I'm only picking on value investing right here. And you'll see bottom far right, that's kind of where we've been for the last 10 years. You'll see all that red down below. It's not unprecedented. It's happened before, but you have to roll back the time machine all the way back to the 1930s to see a similar period. So it's been difficult, but that's expected with this type of investing in value. The same thing with size, investing in small cap, and the same thing with investing in profitability. Let's go to page number 6, and we'll kind of give you a recent snapshot of the differentials between growth and value. For the 1-year period, this is ending May 21st, you'll see that the difference between growth and value investing gapped out to an incredible almost 30% differential. So this feels a lot like what happened back in the early 2000s with the tech bubble crash, or late 1990s basically, where if anyone invested in anything that was technology, it just kept on going up and kept on going up until it didn't. Let's look at the makeup of the S&P 500, which is on page number 7. You'll see that the top 10 stocks in the S&P 500 represent over 26% of the total weight of the S&P 500. So 10 stocks out of 500 represent more than a quarter of this, more than a quarter of the weight of that index. And if you look at those names, it's Microsoft, it's Apple, it's Amazon, Facebook, Alphabet is Google, and there's two share classes of that. So it's predominantly technology that's been driving this. There's a couple reasons for that. A lot of folks have kind of thrown in the towel on active management over the last few years. And when they do that, their alternative is to invest in index funds. Index funds have these weights, these significant weights toward technology stocks. So when you see money going from active to index weights, you see more people having to buy these stocks that are predominantly technology-based stocks, and that exacerbates the price movement. Basically, it's a limited amount. It's lots of dollars chasing these stocks, and so the outcome is going to be that the price is going to increase, and their weight in the index is going to be exacerbated. So it feels like it's March 31st, the year 2000, when the technology stock was about to burst. I've been saying this for a couple of years now, but I'll eventually be right. Now, how have we performed in general? How has the Common School Fund performed in general, even with our exposures to value, to size, to the relatively good amount of weight we have in public equity? If we turn to page number 8, this is a peer comparison of how the Common School Fund is done relative to its peers. TUX is Trust Universe Comparison System. It represents all the custodial banks in this country, so the big ones, State Street, Bank of New York, JP Morgan Chase, the big banks that custody pension plan assets, that custody sovereign wealth fund assets like the Common School Fund, that just custody major institutional assets. You'll see at the bottom, and I apologize for the lettering here, it's pretty small, where it says Common School Fund, that's the little hash mark. Common School Fund for the quarter, and this is for period ending March 31st, 2020, performed at the 42nd percentile, so above the average. And if you go over time to the 1-year, 3-year, all the way to the 10-year, you'll see that the performance hovers between the 50th, close to the 25th percentile. So this is
one of those ones, Mike, where it's where the first percentile is the best, right? That's sometimes
that is correct.
confusing
Thank
to
you
other percentiles. Yep.
For redirecting. That's absolutely. You want your kids to perform in the 99th percentile in their exams, but you want your asset managers to perform in the first percentile. Thank you for bringing that up. So relatively decent, pretty good performance, even given that we're a lot more active than most other peers. We take more risk in regard to active management relative to passive, and still holding up pretty well. I'm down to about 5 minutes of my 20 minutes, so I'm going to move forward on these other pages relatively quickly. If we turn to page number 9, you'll see it's more or less the same story for these other asset classes. So private equity, the performance for private equity, if you look at the top panel, period ending 12/31/19, you'll see that the returns are really robust at the top line. 1-year return is 11%, 3-year return is almost 14%, 5-year return 11%, 10-year return 13.56% return. So fantastic returns, very dominant. We roll forward to 3/31/2020. The returns are still positive, and the reason for this is that private equity reports on a lag. It's a 1-quarter lag. So these returns are truly capturing the returns that were happening in the market a quarter ago. It's an artifact that we all have to deal with in the industry. But nonetheless, still robust returns, fantastic returns. On a relative return basis, how is this done relative to its benchmark? The benchmark we're using here is a capital market benchmark, the Russell 3000, plus 300 basis points for a premium. So the relative returns have been a little challenged, but again, it's something we expect in this environment. We roll over to page 10. We'll see the same thing for alternatives. Alternatives, again, is one of the new asset classes we started investing in. It's a relatively short time period, so we really can't derive too much from this. But nonetheless, the returns have been challenged in this. Again, it's investments in infrastructure, it's investments in liquid alternatives such as long-short equity, commodities and currency, and all these asset classes, all these sub-asset classes have been challenged. We turn to page 11, and this is real estate. Real estate is the one asset class that seems to have held up pretty well. Again, this is a new asset class. If you look at the top panel, 12/31/19, you see the returns for 3 months are 1.4%, for the 1 year 6.6. We roll forward, and we see the returns haven't really changed too much. That said, I can guarantee you that the returns for next quarter, which would be period ending June 30th, are going to be changed. We've obviously seen, as a result of the financial crisis, people not going to work anymore, companies reevaluating whether they need office space anymore, small businesses not being able to pay their rent because they have no income. So this asset class has been challenged, and not in all areas though. I would say mostly in office space and definitely retail. We've seen disruption happening in retail with the Amazons of the world, where that technology has just disrupted that model. People aren't going to malls. They weren't going to malls in the past as much. They prefer to order in, and now with the pandemic, no malls are open really. So it's just been very challenging. So those two sub-asset classes within real estate are starting to report. They're showing maybe their rent collections are about 80% at best. So it's a very challenged asset class, and we expect to see some challenges for this particular asset class as time goes on. If we turn to page 12, which is the last page, this is just a recap of what we've invested in over the last year in 2019. Invested in 2 mandates in alternatives, one called Bridgewater, another one called Brookfield Infrastructure Fund. 1 investment in real estate, Walton Street Fund. Staff is currently working on an alternatives investment, a real estate investment, and 2 private equity commitments, all of which should fund this year. Now, the upside about being in this particular environment is that it gives our staff the opportunity to invest in opportunistic strategies, and not just our staff, but the general partners with whom our staff invest. So I'm talking about private equity, I'm talking about real estate, I'm talking about alternatives. There's been a lot of dislocation, a lot of disruption. So these investments that are being made this year will hopefully be able to seize on that opportunity. One final thing that I want to kind of bring to your attention, even though it's not on the page, it's not in the presentation, just to let you know, performance, and I'm using the S&P 500 as a gauge for this. Performance for the S&P 500 from 12/31/2019, so the end of last year, through yesterday, the S&P is up 2.15%. And that to me is amazing. I mean, we're in an environment in which trade wars are having the diverting trades in the future to higher cost producers, which will in effect increase prices for U.S. consumers. That doesn't seem to be priced in. We've got withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. I apologize, that was my 20-minute timer. We've got a withdrawal at the federal level from Paris Agreement of Climate, Trans-Pacific Partnership, the WHO, no federal, and I apologize, this is my view, federal mismanagement of COVID-19 and wrenching social turmoil, and the market doesn't seem to be pricing that in. So we tend to think it's not going to be rosy. I don't believe that 2.15% is an accurate indicator of what's happened in the U.S. economy this year. I think it gets worse before it gets better. Also wanted to leave you with the fact that as of the end of yesterday, the market value of the Common School Fund is right at $1.8 billion. So it's almost been a round-trip turn. We were 1.9 at the end of the year, dropped down to 1.6. We're back up to 1.8. So I just leaving you with the thought that I think this gets a little bumpy going forward before it gets better. And that's the end of my prepared comments and my ramblings. I apologize.
Thank you. No, thank you. That was extremely informative and very helpful. My recollection, it's certainly the Common School Fund, that's the highest level it's ever been. And I also recall, and I can't remember if this must have been through the 08-12 recession, I think we were pretty close to $1 billion at that point and lost almost half the value of the fund. Does that sound about right to you?
I believe so.
Okay. So
definitely, equities were down 45% from peak to trough over that period in the global financial crisis. So, and equities are the major portion of the Common School Fund. So, yes.
Okay. Secretary Clarno, any questions or comments?
No questions.
Thank you. Treasurer Reed.
Madam Chair, I appreciate the presentation. Of course, I spend a lot more time thinking about this than a lot of other things. So I guess what I would just ask is to have you, Mike, react to my attempt at a summary of what you said, which is setting aside the good point you made at the end about the potential disconnect between markets and what's happening in the real world. What we've really done here is to add to the sophistication of the portfolio by the addition of those asset classes, which had the result of a slight increase in expected returns and a pretty significant reduction in risk. And we've remained pretty committed to the underlying assumptions, value versus growth questions, the way we've constructed these things, and are continuing to evolve the portfolio into a place that's going to be much closer to the all-weather sort of approach. So bumpy, as you said, but nothing that has happened so far that's caused us to shake the confidence or the conviction in the direction we're headed. Is that fair?
I would agree, Treasurer Reed. I mean, the Common School Fund has been through this, through the global financial crisis. Although this didn't start it as a financial crisis, it was a pandemic. It quickly became a financial crisis. So, our job day to day is to worry and to have sleepless nights about what we can do to improve the risk profile of the portfolio. But it's fully within the expected returns. But yes, thank you very much. Your comments were spot on.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. Director Walker.
All right, thank you. See, I told you that would be great. I'm just thrilled to always hear about this report and how well Treasury is managing our fund. So that's good to hear. We have 2 agenda items remaining. Agenda item 10 is just to alert you to a project that's ongoing. Oak Basin LLC owns the surface rights of a 381.8 acre property located in Lynn County. And the coordinates are in the memo, and the map is in Appendix A, so I won't read those. The LLC is obtaining a conservation easement for the property with federal and Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife grant funds. The easement is being pursued for permanent conservation of oak habitat and habitat for Fender's blue butterfly, an endangered species. And as many of you also know, we've had a decrease in oak savannas in Oregon, so this is really a great opportunity. In order to receive the federal and ODFW grants, Oak Basin must acquire the subsurface mineral rights from the Oregon Water Resources Department. How did those folks get it? Well, OWRD obtained the mineral rights when a foreclosure occurred on a loan to a previous property owner, and subsequently retained the subsurface mineral rights when the property sold. OWRD supports the release of the mineral rights and has requested help from DSL in processing the request under OAR 141-073, which is stated below what our obligations are. Because all our due diligence efforts and reports will be conducted by OWRD and submitted to DSL, this item has been brought to your attention as an informational item, because once a Department of Geology and Mineral Industries mineral potential report has been completed and the department's review is complete, you will be seeing a recommendation to the board on whether or not to release these minerals. So that will be coming to you at a future land board meeting, and we just wanted to let you know about that. I should know public comments have been received, so I'm going to move on to our last agenda item. There's a couple of really cool things I want to talk about today. It won't take too much time. Excuse me. The first item is land board awards. The board, as you know, ordinarily in June would be presenting the land board awards today. The nomination and selection process has been completed, but the award ceremony is going to be had in a future meeting because we're all not able to see one another during the coronavirus protections. So recognizing these tremendous contributions of these projects and partners is important, and we hope to have an in-person event in the fall because this is always a very special time for the award winners and for the board members. The second thing I'd like to talk about today is some recent school land sales that we had. As Deputy Director Ryan mentioned during his report, not one, but 2 school land sales agreements have been signed recently, and then we had another one in December. A $22 million sales agreement was signed in April, a transaction that not only benefits the Common School Fund, but will add much-needed housing to the city of Bend. That's our Stevens Road property. When the board approved listing the property for sale in December of last year, Bend's elected officials asked us to move quickly so development could keep rolling towards adding these homes. Move quickly we did, and 2 outstanding results for our students as well, and our broker has been tremendous at helping us on these properties. In May, following on the heels of that sale, we had a $4.5 million sales agreement for the Milliken Road property in Prineville. That sale, of course, also benefits our schools, but has the potential to bring jobs to Central Oregon. We worked with the city of Prineville to annex the parcel as industrial land with development potential for data centers, manufacturing, and other businesses. And I recognize and appreciate Secretary Clarno's comment that without adequate transmission facilities, in this part of the state, we are not going to see the kind of economic development that we'd like to see. So we hope all works out well for the buyer of this property, and we bring much-needed jobs to that part of the state. Those are two sales and two examples of working with communities and partners to meet their needs, and two excellent outcomes for our Common School Fund and Oregon students. And then in December of last year, December 16th, we closed the Helvetia office property in Hillsborough for $4.45 million. And given Mike's report that you just heard today, Mike Pateri's report, I'm glad we sold that property when we did, because it appears that office properties have taken a little bit of a hit in the economic results of the coronavirus. So all in all, I just wanted to report that we have had excellent sales in our real property, and I commend my staff and the brokers that we've worked with, and the local communities in particular for helping make that happen. And I just wanted to pass that along to the board and leave you all on a good note today. And I think that is all I have, and Aaron has messaged me that there are no other comments in the queue. So, Governor, unless any of you have any comments today, that brings us to the close of our meeting.
I do not. Secretary Clarno, any comments for fellow board members in our audience?
No, I just want to say, Director Walker, very good job. Very nicely done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Treasurer Reed.
I just associate myself with the Secretary's comments. Thanks for making this smooth as possible in our remote configuration.
And I'll make it 3 for unanimous, and on that very happy note, we will adjourn the meeting. Please stay safe out there. Thank you to Director Walker and her team for producing an excellent presentations today, and thanks for your hard work. Take care, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Governor.
Kate Brown.
Andrea Chiapella.
Left.